When it comes to technology, especially when it comes to anti-gravity, light speed, the Big Bang Theory, it can go over our heads. Scientific talk can sometimes seem extraterrestrial language we just don't understand. Well, today I have Mark Fiorentino on the show today to talk about his book, Master of Reality. And this is where Einstein left off. And how does the universe really work? Well, maybe he can explain to us so we can understand and be a part of the universe. And maybe we can figure out, and how do extraterrestrials get here? How do they use their technology with anti-gravity and time travel? Well, we're going to find out. Well, I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told. Please welcome to the Truth Be Told studios for the first time, the one and only Mark Fiorentino. Hey, Mark.
Oh.
How are you? Our audience goes crazy because they love this stuff, love science, love UFOs, and we're gonna get right into it. But first of all, thank you for being on the show, and the book Masters of Reality. And first of all, I want to see what made you take that pen and put it on paper and create this book.
Yeah, that's a good question. It really started out, well, it's hard to say when. I guess when I was 19, I was told some stuff that about my future, and that always that stuff stayed in the back of my head for 45 years.
Wow.
But really, when I got first I had an idea to write a fiction book, and I thought, about the theory of super relativity. And then I said, no, that's not right. And I decided to retire early and to, I made a commitment to myself on the first day of retirement. I started on the book. It took me 4 years to complete it because there was a lot of research involved.
Yeah.
And I have one of the most powerful tools in the world. We all do now, the internet, the World Wide Web. And I was able to access documents that were hundreds of years old, looking for clues. And so that's, I thought, well, this is a good thing to do when I retire. So I have some purpose, I have something to do. And it's been on my mind most of my life, this theory of super relativity, which has evolved over the years. So I decided, hey, I know about this. This is something I can write about. And that's how I got into it.
All right, you said you retired. So what did you do as a living?
Well, I worked for a lot of high-tech companies, Harris Government Systems, IBM, ImageSoft, and then I semi-retired into a technical job here locally for working in the IT department at our hospital over here. So I did that for a few years. And then my back started to give out on me, and I decided I better go now. And I retired a little early, so I didn't damage my back anymore. Right. And basically, I've been in the high-tech industry, studying and working on computers, troubleshooting, a lot of troubleshooting. And I used that to write the book because I troubleshot the unified field theory and why we haven't solved it all these years when we should have solved it 50 to 60 years ago, and we didn't. We just shot right by that time frame and are stuck in a kind of a bad model. That's the reason why modern day physicists haven't solved this problem.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense, and this kind of leads me to my question of, okay, you were in IT and and solving issues, but why were you trying to tackle anything to do with Albert Einstein? I mean, that's a big challenge in itself, because I mean, what was that road?
well, I got interested in Albert Einstein at the age of 10 when I found out we were born on the same birthday.
Oh, okay.
Nuns at my church asked us kids who were studying for catechism to find a saint born on your birthday. So I went home, asked my parents. There was nobody born on March 14th, no saint. But I went over to the calendar, and I remember very clearly looking at it and seeing Albert Einstein's name. So I went over to the encyclopedia and I read about him. And then I read about the unified field theory, and it just resonated. I know at the age of 10, that shouldn't happen, but it resonated with me. I says, this makes a great deal of sense, more sense than anything I've ever heard of. And I'm curious about it. So over the years, I kept reading, hoping, waiting for some physicist to solve the problem, but it never happened. And so eventually I just started, making notes and thinking about it. And I would write papers on the side. It's really hard to explain, but there was something in me that, gave me a feeling of being compelled to do it just for the fun of it or the curiosity's
Right.
sake. It's hard to say, but I just always kept involved in it.
I'm sure that wasn't the one of your topics when you first went on a date on your first date. I'm sure that's probably not something that you want to try to explain.
I think it came up once on a date, and the girl actually liked it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
When I talked about it, I talk about like I do on these shows, very enthusiastic and
Right.
very interested in it. And that is something that she noticed and liked a lot.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
other than that, no, I do
Yeah.
not start off my dates talking about, atoms and electrons and photons. And no, that's just most people, they don't want to know.
No, right. Well,
they're looking to see who won American Idol or
right,
something.
right. Yeah, that is true. And who
The
did?
normal
And
world.
yeah, if you know, let me know. So what is unified field theory for those people that made like D's and C's?
Sure. It's actually really very basic and fundamental. It can be said in one sentence. Electromagnetism and gravity emerge as aspects of a single fundamental field. So and this is what Einstein worked on, and I followed his path. So electromagnetism, you have to deconstruct because it's really two different fields, the electrostatic field and the magnetic field.
Right.
And the electrostatic field is the primary field. And that field, that structure, an electron is an electrostatic field, basically. Its structure causes it to move. And when the electron moves, which is a twist of space, goes like this, when it moves, the magnetic field occurs. Always, it takes a charge moving to create the magnetic field, which is a rotational reaction to the moving charge. So that's 2/3 of the way through to the unified field theory. All we had to do is figure out gravitation.
Mm-hmm.
So, and understand what the single fundamental field was, which in Einstein's time was the ether. And many great physicists all believed in the ether. Newton, Maxwell, Einstein,
right.
Lorentz. These are the greats. These are the top guys. And I reestablished the connection to the ether and realized actually it does exist, and they were right about that. And that's a big part of what's in my book.
And I mean, what's funny is I was thinking that, we're here, humans on Earth, we're trying to find the anti-gravity so we can use it for technology to figure out, and we'll get into the UFO stuff a little later, but we're trying to find it to help us travel and do other things. But then we're traveling to Mars and looking at other planets, and then we're trying to figure out maybe how to create gravity so we could live on a planet, or if something happens, so we can understand it. Can you explain gravity itself? I mean, we take it for granted because, we're born here. We, when we fall down and we scrape our knees and elbows, but we don't really understand how fragile and how important it is for us to survive on this planet and any other planet we want to look for.
Yeah. Well, solving anti-gravity comes from understanding gravity. If you want to know how anti-gravity works, you have to know how gravity works. because then you're going to, realize that anti-gravity, however the mechanics is with gravity, it's going to be the reverse.
Right.
Because what I found, in order to, understand gravity, I had to complete the unified field theory, because that's really what it's all about.
Right.
Understanding that geometry, the mechanical geometry. So I'm going to give you two definitions for gravity.
Okay.
My theory definition and the current definition. The current definition basically is they have some sort of idea that gravity, the force of gravity, is mediated or caused by a particle which they have assigned the name of the graviton. And yet they've never found this particle. They keep looking for it, but they never found it. And so that's quantum mechanics theory, and it's really basically based on the idea that force, action at a distance, is caused by a particle-to-particle interaction. That model really turns out to be flawed and incorrect. And that's why they can't solve the problem, because gravity is not about a particle-to-particle interaction. It's about a particle-to-space interaction, the fundamental field, the ether field, a gravitational field. Now I'm going to give you my definition, which has nothing to do with all the other particles interacting with a mythological graviton.
Right.
It's not that complicated. It's actually much simpler. So gravity, according to the theory of super relativity, gravity is caused by the accelerated motion of fundamental unbalanced charges like quarks inside of the neutron and proton.
Mm-hmm.
When charges move in this way, accelerated manner, they cause the space in and around the particle to contract. The gravity is a contraction of the spatial medium, the fundamental field. So forces acting at a distance, gravity being one of those primary forces, are all bendings, deformations of the fundamental field. They cause stresses and tensions in this field that cause the force of attraction, that cause motion and such. So mass is a property of space and is caused by particle motion relative to a stationary space, the ether. Matter acquires its mass as a result of its inertia, which causes the space around and within the particle to contract. Gravity is a contraction of space. So that's it. It's just that simple. And this should have been worked out 50 to 70 years ago. But since we had established, they didn't listen to Einstein. He argued about this. He tried to get Niels Bohr to understand, and Heisenberg. Reality isn't about, probabilities. There is no such thing as a force of probability. Things don't happen because of probabilities. Probabilities happen because things interact and there's a determinism there. But since it was so difficult to measure that, it appeared to the scientists in the 1920s and 30s and 40s and now on that it's all about probabilities, probability clouds, and so forth. And so they went down a rabbit hole. And they didn't follow Einstein's path, which I did, and realized that there's been some fundamental errors in interpretation in our reality. And so they can't find something that they do not look for. They're looking in the wrong place, basically. So that's what gravity is. It's just simply a contraction of space. So if you want to leap to the next step and go to anti-gravity, you realize that if gravity is a contraction of space,
so it would be opposite.
Expansion of space.
Right.
So now we need to know the mechanics. I worked out the mechanics of how to create gravity with motion, accelerated motion of particles. Then you have to do another type of non-accelerated motion of particles to get a gravitational field, and that's through anti-gravitational field, and that's through the use of high magnetics, which I am certain, without any doubt, UFOs use. There's so much evidence been compiled over the years from the Project Blue Book forward that high magnetics is used by UFOs. That I don't know how you could come to any other conclusion at this point.
I mean, if you think about it, if you take two magnets, and you try to, they either come together, or if you flip it over, you can't put them together. It actually pushes it away. So, yeah, I mean, that does make total sense how that works.
Well, you have to see the magnetic field, how we create, according to the theory of super relativity, the anti-gravity field is, you've got to put the rotation in motion. This enhances the stretching of space. As the magnetic field is going around, let's say, a saucer shape.
Right.
You'll notice that at the bottom, when they have landings, that there's a sweeping action happening underneath the UFO. The crop circles, either they're counterclockwise or clockwise. There's a clue there, a nice clue that they left behind for us. And when back in the early days, when Project Blue Book, very often the investigator would bring out a magnometer, which is a piece of equipment that measures the magnetic field strength. They knew something already.
Oh, wow.
Why bring that out there if you didn't suspect there was magnetic fields involved? So what you need to do in order to create an anti-gravity field is you need to have a strong anti-gravity field, and it helps if you rotate it.
Does it matter which direction?
More stretching of space.
Does it matter which direction at all, or does it not?
I don't believe so. North Pole, South Pole.
Right.
Either way, what you want to do is have a powerful magnetic field. I guess if I had to pick one that's more likely to work, because you have the lines of force going in one pole and coming out the other. And so if I were going to use the pole or favorite pole, I would use where the lines of force are coming out of the pole. So it could be, and when I get ready to do some experiments, I'm going to configure it in that manner, because there is a deformation going on there in space. Space is moving like that.
Right.
So that's going to, you want the repulsive motion and not the attractive motion. And so even though, no matter how you line up a magnet to a ferrous, a magnetic object, it'll pull toward, because it creates in the other iron or whatever another magnet with the opposite pole, and then the opposite direction force lines always contract, always pull together. So that's confusing to everybody, because there always seems to be a contraction there. But Faraday worked out, eons ago, another great scientist, that, there's lines of force and a direction to them. So I would say the pole, and I can't remember which pole's in and which, I can look on the internet in a minute to tell you. But the one where the lines of force are coming out, that's the one I'm going to use for to enhance the repulsive effect. But basically, it's the rotation of space that causes a stretching. So if you would imagine, like using, as a kid, playing with silly putty, and you put it down on a comic book picture, and you look at the picture and then you twist it, you can see what happens to the picture. The image stretches apart and it becomes thinner. The actual silly putty gets thinner and thinner as you twist it. The more you twist it, the thinner it gets. And that's exactly what we need. The space is a quasi-elastic solid. And that's what the ether is composed of. So quasi means if I apply a force to it, like a magnetic field out in deep space somewhere, and I remove it, that space snaps back into a Euclidean geometry, a flat Euclidean geometry. That's what that means. It means when you remove a force that bends it, it snaps right back into place. Quasi-elastic. It means it's capable of small deformations or twisting, counterclockwise, clockwise, outward, and inward. That's what you can do with a three-dimensional object that's elastic. And a solid means this, not something that's impenetrable. It's something that is continuous. There's no parts to it. This thing, this ether, is not a field of air or molecules, water. It's not a liquid or a gas. It's a continuous object that can be bent one way or another. It basically stays stationary. It doesn't really move, but objects inside of it are configurations of it, configurations of electromagnetic form. And these things move through that medium, but the medium stays still. It's sort of like, you know, you can imagine maybe how an ocean wave moves. The water isn't going along
like
with
the current.
The wave moves,
right?
But the water, you know, basically stays in place and just ripples.
That's
so it's the same principle.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I was thinking that, let's, you know, real quick, and I was thinking about the like extraterrestrials and their crafts to be able to do travel at high speeds through space, and then coming to, let's say, Earth or a planet that has high gravity. How do they make that switch? Because going from space that's no gravity to gravity itself, so they must either come from a planet that has gravity to be able to create both sides of.
Okay, I can explain this in very good detail.
Please do.
It's going to make a lot of sense.
All right.
The gravitational field is necessary for life to form, so, you know, holds things down like an atmosphere to the planet and so forth. So, you know, everybody's going to come from somewhere where there's gravity. But when you get into outer space and you need to break the light speed barrier, again, the magnetic field comes into play. So we know there's a natural speed limit of the speed of light, and somehow understanding that, I solved that problem of why the speed of light is the number. Actually, it was first solved by James Clerk Maxwell, who recognized that the speed of light, c equals 1 over the square root of permittivity. There it is, c equals 1 over the square root of permittivity times permeability. That happens because the light particle, the photon, is interacting with the medium that it's within. And it's basically the permittivity and permeability seem to be acting as impedance of some sort. So if you want to break the light speed barrier, you have to use the magnetic field to reduce permittivity and permeability. So if you calculate that equation again, with reduced numbers of permittivity and permeability, you will find that the speed of light is now higher. The more you reduce permittivity and permeability, which are properties of free space, you can go out into the, you know, in between the Earth and the moon somewhere where there's nothing else, and take a meter that measures that, and you will see the free space has a certain value, which is an indication, again, that the ether exists. Space is a real object.
Right.
And so, but you, in order to break the light speed barrier, which is what we want to know how to do, you have to make the anti-gravity field, because the anti-gravity field is an inverse hyperbolic field. It's stretching outward. So you get the great effect of the bonus effect of reducing permittivity and permeability, because there's less space now in between any 2 points A and B. The magnetic field is pulling it apart. It's bulging out so that you get less space, less density, and less permittivity and permeability, which now change the maximum speed that you can go, and also reduces the weight of your craft to 0. So you have no inertial effects. If we had a spaceship and we wanted to use rockets to go to the speed of light, it'd be impossible. It would take all the energy of the universe, because as you built up toward the speed of light, you would be having inertial effects that would be requiring more and more energy to push you up to that speed. Once you're inside of the thing I call the slipwave, which is this magnetic field bubble, it causes the space within that area also to expand, reducing the density, reducing the amount of permittivity and permeability, and now you can go at any speed you desire.
Oh my gosh.
1,000 times the speed of light, 10,000, 1,000,000. You can get to another star in a matter of minutes, not years. And that's what has to happen.
Is this what we call time travel?
it's not really time travel. Inside of the slipwave,
Right.
time actually goes just slightly faster.
Really?
Lorenz determined, in talking to Einstein about this, he said, you know, you can detect the ether by looking at your clock. The clock that moves the fastest is the one that's moving slowest relative to the ether. So the Earth is moving through space,
Right.
and the star system is also moving within the galaxy, and the whole galaxy is moving. There's all these motions involved. So our clock is going to be running a little bit slower than a clock that's truly stationary. So when you're inside of the slipwave, it's just like, according to the stuff inside of that bubble, it's as if you're not moving at all, no matter how fast you're going.
Wow.
So the clock in your spaceship would go slightly faster. You would not have the time dilation problem that you would have in an ordinary spaceship or being in a gravitational field. That's gone, which has to be gone. So you can travel in real time in 15 minutes to go to Proxima Centauri, which would take 4.2 light years. Now you can do it in 15 minutes. That's practical. That's the way to colonize another planet. It can't take years and decades and lifetimes
right.
to do that. It just wouldn't work. You can't use rockets. This is the technology you have to use. This is what I call the entry level technology for any human species or any other type of species out there, other planetaries, ETs, whatever. This is how you get into the game, becoming celestial beings. You evolve, you make this step technologically, and hopefully spiritually you're ready for this.
Right.
Because you do not want to go out there with a bad attitude.
That's for sure. No,
because everybody else out there can kick our butts. Really, they could. If ET wanted to get rid of us, all they have to do is push one asteroid at us, which would be like the simplest thing for them to do. Take a 10-mile wide one, push it at us. Goodbye, human beings. But they don't do that because I don't think they're our enemy.
Right.
But if we were to go to their planet and say, hey, we want to colonize here, we're going to do it, like it or not, then we could have trouble. So we need to be like on Star Trek and, be very mild about what you're doing and how you interact with other people.
Well, definitely, they're way ahead of us in technology, so we definitely don't want to piss them off.
There's stuff that, I'm not even, would seem like magic to us, things that they can do, like moving through solid objects, which a lot of people who are on, who have been abducted claim that these aliens can do. I mean, that's like godly.
But
how, us, us little beings here.
How would that, what we're talking about, be able to transfer over into a human? What type of technology would they need to have or create to be able to, move through objects? And is that something that would even be connected to what we're talking about?
It could possibly. There could be some magnetic configuration, resonant field.
Right.
See, what happens is, like, the particles in your body in that spaceship, now I've heard they can go right through the solid planet, right?
Right.
Somehow you either there's two ways that I can think of. You go interdimensional. You skip out of this dimension into a parallel dimension in which there is no solid object.
Right.
Go through that area, and then you come back out into this dimension when you get to the other side. That could be done with magnetic resonant fields. Speculation. All right, that's kind of what the Philadelphia experiment was all about. Then the other one, more sophisticated, much more advanced beings, is that they can combine their psychic abilities with some way where they can make the particles within the ship and cooperate in such a way that, no solid object is really truly solid. There's lots of space between the particles, and somehow the ship and everybody in the ship, maybe with some electromechanical activity with the psychic abilities, they just say particles, come apart, and you go right through, and then it, comes back together. That's highly speculative. You're talking about beings that are not just a few hundred years ahead of us.
Oh gosh.
They're tens of thousands, perhaps many millions. Can you imagine our technology in a million years?
I mean, look at what happened in 100.
Yeah, look what's happened in just the last 100 years.
Yeah.
We've gone from horse and buggy to rockets.
Yeah.
So, and we're talking about another quantum jump here in technology. I mean, it'll take us from being terrestrial beings to being celestial beings, joining our brothers and sisters who we're going to obviously meet when we go out there.
Right.
And
right.
So this is a big jump that I'm pushing for. And I think it's time, because I'm here and I figured it out. So there must be something to this.
Well, I'm going to ask you this because I found this interesting, that in your book, and everybody that's just tuning in, it's Mark Fiorentino in his book Master of Reality, the super relativity, the unified field theory. You mentioned near-death experiences that are linked to theory of super relativity. I found that fascinating because my grandfather had a near-death experience back in the 60s. I've interviewed many people over the years that had near-death experiences. And, my mother passed away, and she talked about, seeing people and people from her past that were passed on, that were younger before she passed away. Could you talk about how you connect that super relativity theory with near-death experiences? I found that really fascinating.
Sure. There is actually a logical path. It started with an inspiration from Einstein, who basically made a statement way back when he wanted to know God's thoughts and how the universe worked. I want to know how God created this world. I am not interested in this or that phenomena, in the spectrum of this or that element. I want to know his thoughts. The rest are just details.
Right.
And I thought about what he said. He said, sounds like he wants to read God's mind. And you know what? That's not really a bad idea. That's a very good idea. Because if you want to know how something works, you need to go to the person who created that something. That's what I always did when I was a troubleshooter at IBM,
right,
and Harris, and all these other places. There's a problem. I go to the guy that created that electronic card assembly or program, and I'd ask him to explain it to me. And then you have some groundwork, some foundation to understand what's going on. So I thought about what Einstein said. I says, well, maybe, who talks to God? I mean, it's kind of hard to do. Mediums can do it, and people who have near-death experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that time, what I was thinking about was I was searching for something. And I thought, well, there is a dynamical geometry. And I know Einstein was also looking for this for the unified field theory. The dynamical geometry, I know, will be composed of three segments. Why three? Because quarks, there are three quarks inside of the neutron and the proton. And I thought to myself, I must find what I call the signature of God. And the signature, this little thing popped in my head. I'm linking all these thoughts together to get to the NDE. The thinking that I had about the signature is that it's going to be the creator. This is an intelligent design theory. The creator's idea or way of signing his universe. So I thought the signature will be everywhere and in everything, but impossible to see. And then I realized, of course, it has to be inside of the neutron and proton, that dynamical geometry. So I decided to go through NDE sites. I'm going to ask the creator, and I'm going to say, hey, creator knows I'm coming. He knows that someday me or somebody else is going to look for this answer, so he's going to tell somebody in a near-death experience. Maybe what harm would it be to go and look? So I started reading through hundreds of NDEs, and I found a lady that saw a dynamical geometry, and while she was looking at it, God himself tells her, I am the energy that causes mass. My ears pop up when I read this. I am the source of the gravitational field. He says a lot of different things, specifically talking about, and while she's hearing this, she's seeing this.
Oh, wow.
This is the trefoil knot. This is the most common, simplest form of knot there is. It's been around. You've seen the trefoil knot in even in Christianity. It shows up every once in a while in some other religions and so forth, and folklore. This is us connecting to the source. Inside of the neutron and proton, this is the dynamical geometry I was seeking. And it was in 3 segments, just like I imagined. So it's all making sense. And Claire Dennis was the one to see this, and she had a near-death experience when she was going over Alps in a hot air balloon, and they went up too high. She lost consciousness, and they had to do an emergency descent and revive her. And when she came out of it, she said, I saw all this, and tried to explain it. And she wrote some books on it and so forth. And so I realized that from this NDE, God sent the message. This is the dynamical geometry. Now I could work on the math. I could derive equations to describe that, because the quarks are moving at what I calculated. And what's really weird is I calculated this quark speed 5 years before I wrote the book. For some strange reason, I decided I was going to figure out how fast quarks move, not even thinking about, anything else other than I know that quarks move inside of. And I was curious. So I actually used that number for the final equations in my final paper of the unified field theory of the origins of mass, gravity, and inertia. It came in handy, just like synchronicity here is going on. And so I found this geometry, which Einstein was looking for, and I've just realized that particles move on their own via their structure. So I had all the mechanical parts necessary to compose the equations necessary. And I'm not even a physicist. I had to hire somebody to train me on certain things so I could figure this out and work out the problem. But I knew what exactly I needed to study. I said, I don't want to learn anything. I want you to teach me this, that, and this. Then I came back and I composed the equations, a system of equations that predicts the neutron and proton mass. Problem solved. So this is how the NDE got connected in here. I just decided that if you want to know how something works, go to the creator of that something and ask them.
And I think, like you said, a lot of people do find answers in those NDEs.
Well, I'm going to do some more. I know a psychic, a very good one, very gifted, and what will be in my next book. I wasn't going to write a next book. After this book was done, I said,
like, I'm done.
That was a lot of work. And I'm not interested. I've said everything I wanted to say. But I wasn't really sure if it was right or not. I thought, this really seems like a unified field theory solution here, but, I'll wait and see. But now that it's out and I know, in the second book, I'll tell you why I know that it's right. I said, now it's worth the effort to write a second book, because there's a hell of a backstory going on here that goes back 45 years. When this was predicted to happen, when I on a lark, me and a bunch of guys went to have a reading done, and that day was, let's get our fortunes told.
Right.
It was just for fun. And during that session, I had a normal session, but after it was all over and the other guy went in, he talked to her, and then we got in our car and we drove over to Daytona. On the way there, he says, "Hey, that's something special about what she said about you." And I said, "What?" She didn't tell me anything. I'm going to get married. I'm going to, get into electronics. All that did happen. She was 100% correct, but she didn't mention any future discoveries or anything.
Right, right.
But she did to him. So that was deliberate. So I'm thinking they told her not to tell me while I was in the room, because I would ask questions and I would have wanted to get right on it. And that's not the way, that's not the plan. Plan is that I had to go through a lifetime of experiences to work my way to this moment, which is exactly what happened. And then this was confirmed by 5 more psychics all along the way, but they would never give me any details until this last one. Once I made it to writing this book, the thing I was supposed to do, then it was like a waterfall of information started coming out. I says, "Oh yeah, that's you were sent to do this. This is part of your plan." And I won't go any further than that. It's because the next, it's going to be in a whole book, and I want to lay out.
No, yeah, we want to hear.
I want to lay out every detail because there is a lot of cooperation between, 6 different psychics. A lot of these guys were world famous. They weren't,
just on the corner, hackers. $10 an hour type.
Yeah, of thing. No, not the $10 one at the lobby. Right. I'm talking. Right. I'm talking well-known mediums.
Yeah, I always found near-death experiences fascinating, and I mean, if you look at it, I mean, because the way I'm going to just show a picture. The way we show it reminds us of space. It reminds us of space travel, and that's how it always fascinated me how, just energy, our soul, which is energy, energy never dies, so it has to go somewhere. And so when you hear these people like, oh, when you die, it's just your brain creates these chemicals it protects you, and it's more for just a better transition, and you just die, and and that's it. But it, like you said, for me, I've always asked the question, why were not just we created, this universe created, because it's always expanding. Everything's expanding. Our minds, our evolution, space itself. And I always wondered who and why we were created this. And then, like you said, now near-death experiences, many of us get, not me, I've never had one, but get answers to a lot of these questions that we've been asking for at least 20, 30,000 years, at least, or longer.
Well, everything you just said is correct. I have no disagreement with anything you just said. I would like to add, though,
please,
we should be listening to these people that have these NDEs, because they're bringing back knowledge and information from the source. So it's relevant, it's important, it's the way things really are. This little reality that we think is all there is, this is primitive thinking. This
right.
Oh, there's no God, this is primitive thinking that they think is advanced. It's what's holding back scientists, in my opinion. If I have my way, religion and science are going to merge again, because science comes from religion. And another near-death person says this clearly and exactly. Father Rick Wendell, who had a near-death experience, became a priest afterwards. He has God explain to him just exactly what this dimension is and what's going on here. And he says this, all of this three-dimensional world is within God. There is nothing outside of God. Everything within this physical universe has to correspond to laws, and God set those laws. They are immutable as God is immutable. None of this, what we see and experience, is an accident. It is intentioned by God. And in my book, I use this phrase, power of intention, in right. certain areas, the beginning of this universe, of the creation of the first cycle of this universe was accomplished through the power of intention. Time really does not exist. God is outside of time. We have a perception of time in this physical world.
Right.
That perception changes according to our circumstances. And that's absolutely true. If you look at general relativity and special relativity, you change your circumstances, your speed relative to the motion of the ether, time will slow down, or will appear to slow down. What really slows down is the clocks. You can't really touch time. But if you were in, and physicists would argue about what I'm about to say here, and if you were in a rocket ship without the slipwave,
right,
my discovery, you take that out and you just use regular rockets and you went up to 99% of the speed of light, your clock would stop and you'd look down and you would see it would stop. But you know what? You really couldn't look because there would be so many bad things happening to you. Yeah. You'd be flat as a pancake, the Lorentz transformation for length contraction, which makes gravity possible, which also increases, coincidentally, inertial mass. Your mass of that ship would be approaching infinity. You would have a lot of problems. You wouldn't be able to move. You wouldn't be able to think because the molecules and are all flattening out because they can't move in this forward direction any more than already. So your thought processes are going to freeze up. You're not going to have consciousness. But if you did, you could see that clock had stopped moving. So that's how we perceive time. We need actual physical space and we need motion because it's all about intervals. And that's how intervals arrive. You have to have a real space, a distance, and you have to have a specific amount of time to travel across that. When you have those two things, time emerges into this physical reality as something that we can experience.
And that's a good way to explain how we could do that, because like you said, at the speed of sound or speed of light, you're pretty much not going to survive because your body couldn't take it. But
no, but regular physicists would start screaming at us for saying that because they believe the old Einstein interpretation, which I go over in detail in my book, why he did what he did with special relativity, and really kind of started us off in the wrong direction. And I think he tried to fix it later on, but he did a little sleight of hand with the interpretation, which has to do with, you can read the book to find out, because I go over all the details, the history, the speeches he made. He knew about the Michelson-Morley experiment ahead of time, and he knew that experiment wasn't going to verify the ether. And so he discounted the ether in his special relativity. He pulled a little mathematical trick, and everybody bid on it, and they still believe it to this day, but that has to be fixed as well. That interpretation is wrong about special relativity.
Well, just with the little time we have left, I do have a question that we might be able to answer. And I think I find it fascinating that you're saying many scientists, have definitely could have had the answers a long time ago to figure out a lot of what we're talking about, 40, 50 years ago. And I'm curious, why do you think that has not happened before? Because I'm just briefly going to talk about the Nazis and the Nazi bell, where they were trying to figure out anti-gravity device, during the war. I don't want to get too far into that because I don't want to, that's a whole nother topic. But why are we not? I mean, even though we're way further advanced than, we could ever even imagine. But why do you think we're not there yet when it comes to, like, extraterrestrials to be able to travel to other galaxies in a minute or two? And how far do you think we're off from that?
Well, first of all, I think the United States government, maybe some of the other governments, but certainly the United States government already has anti-gravity. I already know everything I just said is true. And they've kept it secret.
Right.
Why? Because they want to have a military strategic advantage, number one. And there's some claim that maybe the people couldn't take it.
Right.
They would, have, riots or whatever, and that may be true. But
Right.
certainly the strategic military advantage is the number one reason why anti-gravity has not been, there isn't companies like Sanyo and Sony and whatever making, hovercrafts,
Right.
and so forth. So, and then there's the other problem is the government, certainly all the world's governments, encouraged the study of particles and accelerators and string theory. And they're happy for them to keep wasting their time on those projects. Those projects will never lead to anti-gravity. There's no anti-gravity particle really. They wouldn't even know how to construct it. Since they haven't solved the gravitational problem, there's absolutely nobody even willing to even discuss the anti-gravity problem, because they have the idea that anti-gravity is fiction. We don't see it, we don't hear it, we don't know it, it doesn't exist. We're not even going to look. So mainstream science, you're not going to get funding for it. You're not gonna, unless you're private industry, unless you work for the government. And then
Right.
I got a list of companies that are working on anti-gravity, a long list that are funded by the government. But they already know, and they want to, and it's their best kept secret. So it's a twofold problem. The government isn't going to help them. People who have discovered it, like Poklanoff and Ling Ni, I think is her name, they've been suppressed, as well as others along the way. You hit on this technology and they don't want you to know about it, they'll do a number of things to quiet that down and discredit you or whatever it takes to make it go away. And to this day, they've done a great job in that. But at some point, something's going to have to give. Maybe there's going to be a disclosure in a year or two
Right.
or whatever at some point.
We hope.
But I don't know. I don't have really any inside information on that other than I think it'll happen at some point. And when that happens, then, it's going to naturally lead to discussions on anti-gravity again, unless they just continue to lie about it and say, oh, we don't know how that works.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it, though, they had electric cars and cars that ran on all kinds of different things when they first invented cars. And then the patents were bought and shelved, right. and then the gas companies came in and said, this is the way it's going to be. So, it's all about money. It's all about power. And, and
yes, that's a very real, I left that out, but you're absolutely right. That's probably the primary reason. The technology, especially free energy type technologies, I know for a fact, because I know somebody that was on the inside of a power company and they saw the patents and they told me, we bought things that would change the world. We just don't use them. Yeah.
No, and I think, the government, has done the same. So unfortunately, that's just the way it is. And until, like you said, we run out of something or, a resource is.
Well, we run out of oil. You're going to have to go to electric. Electric cars really the way they are now with the battery technology.
Right. So
not so hot.
Yeah. No. Hey, but we have people like you that bring us, Masters of Reality books and keeps our minds thinking and expanding and opening up to all the possibilities that, we have been given by the Creator, whatever you want to call it. But Mark, I definitely would love to have you back. We didn't touch on so many other things. So would you mind doing a part 2 down the road?
Sure. Yeah, there's lots of good things. I definitely want to cover the theory of neutronium cores.
Oh my gosh, really, yes, please.
Really important to go over. There's a lot of seriousness, and it's a great discovery. It's Nobel-worthy discovery. Yeah. Well, so we could talk about that and a whole bunch more.
All right, everybody, you've heard it here. Mark's going to come back, and we have so much more to talk about. But I really enjoyed this conversation today. I hope everybody else did. I know Scotty had one question, so we're going to finish with that. He goes, any opinion on CERN?
CERN, I love physicists. Don't get me wrong. I love them. But it's the biggest waste of money and time are going, because you're going to be able to continue to create. If you build bigger machines, you'll squeeze out a few more particles. But we only really know, and I'm going to come out with a model, a new fundamental particle interaction model that's so much simpler. What relates to us in ordinary matter is just a few particles. All these others are created by collisions. Mm-hmm. And they're making them out like they're wholly new particles that exist in a hidden dimension. And that whole model is incorrect. And they base their whole economy on it. And, if we could just build a little bit bigger one and they work all this math out and all this effort, our greatest minds are being wasted on a dead end technology and theory, which is basically the quantum field theory. It's a complete waste of time. It's going to lead us nowhere. We should have stayed with classical field theory and Einstein, but that's my opinion on CERN.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us in the chat room. As always, I call you guys my co-host. You asked some of the greatest questions, and I really appreciate you guys for tuning in today. And Mark, thank you again. Where can people find you and your book and find more information about you?
Well, of course, I'm on www.super-relativity.com, and there's a bunch of buttons right on the front page that are hot links right to where you might want to go to buy the book, or to go to read my theory on ResearchGate. The actual proof for the unified field theory is there on ResearchGate. And of course, to my YouTube site, you can go directly there. Please subscribe to my YouTube site, and I put new videos, maybe this one, if you allow me to.
Of course.
All right. I'll put it up there. So I have a central location. Each one of these videos is very important because they're beacons. I'm setting beacons out for people, I'm hoping, who are going to want to build a starship. Ooh, I can help them do that. There's many pitfalls, and I can help them dodge those pitfalls. So that's basically the places I'm at, mainly YouTube, and of course Facebook. You can look me up there if you want to friend me.
All right, if we build a starship, can I be first officer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, right. You just gotta have the right attitude.
Right. I can do this.
Attitude is everything. No, I can't do that. Wait a minute. Yeah. I can't.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys. And as always, you have me usually on Fridays, but today was a special show just because, unfortunately, last week I couldn't do it. But Mondays at 3 o'clock, a Minuteman Report with Robert Hensley. Wednesdays at 3 o'clock with Bonnie Burkhead, who is going to be doing the Truth Be Told transformation. If you like those meditations and gurus and spirituality, please join her, and of course me every Friday. So until next time, I'm Tony Sweet for Truth Be Told. Take care, guys. This has been another episode of Truth Be Told. Thank you so much for watching. Recorded live at UBN Go Studios in Burbank, California. Join us on social media. Facebook, Truth Be Told Radio. Instagram, Truth Be Told Paranormal. Go to Truth Be Told Worldwide for more information on upcoming shows.